Fellow Naughty Steppers, what is up? Another day, another review on the Nawtystep channel. Jesus, bloody hell, I really need a haircut, don't I? But I hope you've got room for some extra carbs because today I'm going to be talking to you about the latest EP from SPAG HEDDY, released on Never Say Die Records, Gospel. Everyone's favourite pasta man is back with his first 4-track project since last May's Meatball Mafia, which was another example of me loving a couple of tracks from an EP but not enjoying it in its entirety. Because SPAG HEDDY to me is one of those artists whose style I really like and who has some truly boundary-breaking and genre-defining songs, but who I simultaneously feel is yet to put out an EP that I have liked from start to finish, displaying a real consistency over the last 4 or 5 years without completely taking me aback with a multi-track release. That being said, this hasn't stopped me recognising his production method as one of the most exquisite and unique in the dubstep scene overall, combining explosive drum patterns with a generally visceral synth approach, all the while lending a jovial and comedic aspect to his sound at points. But with this latest EP, I think it is the harsher elements of his technique that are most evident, realised through jagged grating effects and verging on white noise in its almost crackly nature. This unerringly grisly sound design is apparent in every track here, and is one of the features of SPAG HEDDY's aesthetic that signals it as his, that which has most become his own. And whilst the drops are relatively straightforward, he returns to that staggered stop-start vibe that has a real grip on its audience, as in the latter parts of the drop to Gospel, or the original drop in Vegas. This is another truly unique thing about his music, and is unparalleled by anyone who has attempted to mimic it in the past. The synths are very offbeat and off-kilter, but they still work very well against the normal running backdrop, almost separate from the beat, creating that jagged, disorienting vibe particular only to him. And it's great to have music like this in the dubstep sphere because whilst it may not be pretty on the surface or easy on the ear, it requires the listener to dig a little deeper and explore SPAG HEDDY's choices with regards to note placement and their importance a little more. And it only happens fleetingly in the last 2 tracks, but enough to make it something that runs through the 4 songs as a whole. More common with Ballroom and Straight Up is its inability to stick with a certain sequence of dubstep and be keener instead to move on to something new. And it's these sorts of moments that prevent the EP from being a truly great one because the flow of the heaviness is disrupted. However, this jumping between different patterns does ensure that there is a nice variation between the drops overall. The development of the drop in the first track in its second drop, or even the array of styles covered in the second song, or the more stripped back direction in the third, and the changing of tempo in the fourth. And it is in that 4th track, Straight Up, that I would say I noticed the variety in dubstep the most of all the tracks. Grungy, tearing sounds, but also a nice stabbing effect to them, as well as those high-pitched flickering notes too. And that change-up in the second drop of Gospel is completely seizing, and proof once more of his at times excellent layering of sounds. And so this EP is a good representation of SPAG HEDDY's versatility as a producer of dubstep, especially with the tempos of these tracks being pretty similar throughout. And with regards to the drums, the first opportunity to really appreciate them comes in the 3rd track, bereft of a vocal and with a more skeletal structure. But the more I listen to these songs, the more I try to focus solely on the drums and their part within them. And they're extremely impactful throughout, a real mix of intricacy and thumping, plosive hits to give it that well-rounded feel. This is something that SPAG HEDDY is notoriously good at, and it's how he incorporates different moods into his general sound. From the jovial and uplifting to the straight-up remorseless and brutal. And with regards to the former, there are points where I'm pining for that circus-like approach a bit more, that which makes his music so playful and enjoyable at times. And it is addressed in Ballroom with those very cheerful and frantic notes in the introduction and build-up. But whilst he's pretty much always on point with his musicality, I still feel like he could have lobbed a bit more of this sprightliness into the sauce pot. But it is telling that the point in which he deployed this style is the only track without a leading vocal. So maybe it is only with that bare instrumental that he felt he could go down that productive avenue. And in spite of this, these songs repeatedly verge on the surreal, the insane, the out of control. From the squealing sounds in the first, to the vocal manipulation in the second, to the interaction between the vocal sample and the quirky effects in the third, and the neat little climbing notes in the fourth. Yet all seemingly in a different way to his past stuff, less parade-like and comical and more unsettling and manic. which is helped along by the high-pitched synths, as well as the vocal snippets littered throughout. The whoops in the first, the giggle towards the end of the second, the squeaky car brake noises in the third, or the distant calls of go in the drops of the fourth. There is room for many more of these in this EP, but that would only be if he wanted to give it a more cartoony feel overall. Instead, it remains a serious and to-the-point collection of tracks, providing what your everyday dubstep fan would ask for. And I can't go any further without mentioning the vocals, which are generally punchy and in your face, well suited to the weighty instrumentals they're on top of. In the title track, Born Eye Music's haunting delivery fits the gloomy, nightmarish bass provided by Mr. Heddy with aplomb. Whilst in Straight Up, Armani Rain does very well to capture the grandeur of the song overall. He's very quickly becoming one of my favourite producers in the EDM sphere. And although the Sam King vocal is a little unorthodox, it certainly has its own individuality and aligns more with Spag Heddy's playful side than his heavier one. And in conclusion, I feel like these songs are pretty much as good as they can be before being exceptional. It's a very solid EP, but it doesn't push the highest boundaries. It's a continuation of his brilliance, but it doesn't stretch far beyond that. And so in a way, Gospel differs from previous Spag Heddy projects in that I think I will return to it as a whole, but not listen to the tracks that much individually.
Another thing that I'd like to mention at this point that I didn't get to include in the original review when I filmed it is that when I've been talking about these traits generally, I've been talking about them in terms of track 1, track 2, track 3, track 4, and that is because most of them apply in all of these songs, if not all of them, and that's what I appreciate ultimately most about this EP, is its consistency.
I really appreciate the gung-ho, all systems go relentlessness to its sound. It really demands something of the listener. And the inclusion of the vocals seems to elevate his sound to a different level in many respects. It's a different angle from which to appreciate his music. And on a complete side note, and something that I didn't feel fit into any of the overarching points I wanted to make on Gospel, the organ sounds of the opening song are absolutely amazing. How they introduce the first drop of the EP in such a grand manner and are then incorporated into the second main build-up to make it get to the point a bit quicker, it's just bellissimo. And in terms of a favourite from Gospel, I would have to go with Ballroom. Whilst I do enjoy the vocals on this EP a lot, the thing I love most about Spag Heddy ultimately is the uniqueness of his sound. And I feel this shines through most on the song where there is no vocal included, and it is instead the music that does the talking. And I also really enjoy the contained nature of it. It does very well to fit a varied amount of sounds into that tight structure. And those gritty, tractor engine-esque noises that give it that classically edgy and rough appeal. And recommendation-wise, I'd definitely check out some early Twine, as well as some E-Hide and Dr. Ozzy, two artists who Spag Heddy has actually collaborated with in the past. And so there we have it for the latest Spag Heddy EP released on Never Say Die Records, Gospel. Thank you very much once again for watching. Like this video, share it about, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts on Gospel. What did you guys, the watchers, the listeners, the commenters, make of it? And don't forget to like and follow Nawtystep across all social media if you are yet to. With everything linked, including the recommendations, in the description box down below. And lastly, if it's naughty, then you know. So keep it naughty and stay safe. And I shall see you all in the next one. Over and out. Peace.